I'm Corinne Wallace. I work with the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment and Health, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of private sector in the water issues, particularly for low and middle income countries around the world. The water sector has an annual revenue of approximately $500 billion, and it's increasing by 5 to 10% every year. So there's obviously an economic incentive for companies around the world to become involved in rural and low and middle income countries. Meanwhile, there are 2.5 billion people around the world without access to adequate sanitation facilities, and about 1 billion people around the world who defecate in the open. That means that they use nature as their toilet, and as a result are contaminating water resources. We also have 700 million people who don't have access to adequate drinking water, and as a result of that there are 1,600 children every day who die as a result of diarrhea, which is completely unavoidable, and we don't need to be dealing with this. The economic impacts are significant, both from the education of a country, but also the productivity of the country. In fact, the World Bank has suggested that up to 6% of GDP can be lost as a result of lack of access to sanitation, which means that it's costing the world $260 billion every year. In terms of the opportunities, it's not that the poor can't afford water, it's that they can't afford not to have water. And many are paying beyond the rates that you and I are paying for through informal providers, and they could be paying an order of magnitude of 10 times more than we do for our water, which means that they can afford it. They just can't afford the infrastructure that needs to be in place, the upfront investment. So there are significant opportunities there for water provision in rural communities, particularly if we can bring the different technologies that we use in high-income countries and are able to simplify them and bring them to bear in the context of these low and middle income countries. More broadly, the loss of labour as a result of sickness and suppressed productivity cost different companies money over time, and this again is something that should be of concern, and it impacts upon the supply chains and the productivity, which obviously then impacts upon profitability of companies. So the water and sanitation is part of the social values that should be of importance to companies, especially when they're working in low and middle income countries, whether it be small scale and medium enterprise companies or whether it be large conglomerates. One of the opportunities is to, as part of creating shared values, to strengthen supply chains through the enhancement of social conditions within communities. So this means partnering with other public, private, civil society organizations to provide infrastructure, particularly water and sanitation, to communities to enhance well-being in these communities, and thereby enhancing the productivity and the commitment of individuals to the companies, the job creation that can occur. But on top of that, by lifting people out of poverty, you are creating consumers, and by creating consumers you are stabilizing the local economy and providing opportunities for individuals to purchase goods that are manufactured by businesses. And so you actually close the cycle between the business enterprise, if you will, and the social enterprise. So the profitability, but also the social value within each community. So there are lots of opportunities and many innovations that can be implemented, particularly to increase the market size. For example, people refer to the bottom billion, or the bottom of the pyramid, which is the 1 billion people around the world who live on less than $1 a day, or the 4 billion, which is 2/3 of our global population, that live on less than $2.50 a day. By raising these people out of poverty, the market size, global market size, increases obviously significantly. And not only that, but if we're able to provide appropriate technologies from a water and sanitation perspective, there doesn't have to be a large profit margin, but the sheer numbers of people that we're talking about, because this bottom of the pyramid are also the people without access to water and sanitation, the opportunities to make money are still significant. By using the money and reinvesting the money that you can obtain, for example, through anaerobic digestion, which results in biogas that can be used for fuel to offset electricity costs, and or solid fuel pellets, and or fertilizer, the fecal sludge that can be used for soil amendment and to fertilize crops and thereby increase productivity, then you can offset the costs of providing the sanitation that's required to collect the waste in the first place. And so closing the loop and understanding the distribution of both social and economic costs and benefits across the different stakeholders can actually help support innovations in sanitation and wastewater treatment and other mechanisms for actually financing some of the technological innovations and implementation. For example, by harnessing some of the local savings schemes that women in particular have in rural communities, and then using those to invest in water and sanitation through medium-scale, low-interest loans to offset and to then provide income to these women's groups that will pay back the loan through the purchase of water by the rest of the community. So there are lots and lots of opportunities, particularly if the private sector, whatever size of operations they have, are willing to work with local community leaders and also with the governments and with the civil society, then there are opportunities for making money and making a difference.